perfect day for it. Perfect.
Isn't it beautiful?
Oh,
It is beautiful.
Beautiful out there.
I mean, of course, we're in an office, so how would we know that it's
We
beautiful?
don't know.
Yes, we're trapped.
We're trapped in here.
Welcome to the show. We are here. I'm here with my guest, Daryn Johnson. Did you get this in the mail today? I got this in the mail this morning.
Not today, so it's probably waiting at home.
50th anniversary of that school that we attended back in the 1900s.
That's right. The year of our Lord.
And it's
19.
fascinating to see that it's been 50 years.
Yeah.
And we were there at a time where you could probably find your classes you wanted on a little fold-out pamphlet to tell you, what classes you want to take. But you've seen it from both ends now because you've had the opportunity to not only be a student there, but you've done a little teaching there briefly a couple of years ago. Is that true?
Oh, wait, yeah.
And what were you teaching?
Directing, actually. I had gotten a phone call from one of my former professors who said that there was a need at the time for somebody to kind of fill a hole for teaching directing. And would I be interested? And I thought, I've never really given that much of a thought before. But he said, well, think about it for a couple weeks and let me know.
It's kind of like the person who can speak Spanish very well and then come to America and teach Spanish to people. You've known how to direct for many, many years. Why not become a teacher, perhaps?
Well, yeah, I think you said it best. I think when I told you, hey, guess what I'm going to be doing, you had said, well, you've been kind of doing it informally for so long, might as well get...
All the kids that have come through, that have come and gone through Fox 35. That's the place, right?
Indeed. Lest we forget.
So why not? Give a little back and teach a little to the future.
Well, and it was awesome. I mean, I accepted and was very happy to do it. In fact, the way I had even got to Fox 35 was through an adjunct professor, Tim Bartlett, who was a director at Fox 35. So I was really into that. I remember thinking, I had very good teachers at UCF. But I remember being particularly fond of what I felt were some of the guys that, once they were done teaching, they were zipping off to work. It kind of made sense to me, which is what happened with me. So I was very happy to do it and thrilled, but I didn't expect to love it as much as I did.
And you came there at a time to Fox 35 before there was even news.
Well, yeah, I was an intern in '93. In fact, when my faculty advisor, Keith Fowles, said, now, do you want to learn production or do you want to, sit on an assignment desk and answer phones? I said, well, I want to learn production. He goes, you go to Fox 35. They don't have news. This was in '93.
Right.
And he said, just go to Fox 35. They don't have news. You'll learn production.
And at that time, there were not even plans for news yet. That was so far off.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was there in '93 and then came back in '99 once they had launched news in '98. And I came back in '99 to direct news there. And again, in 2008, had the chance to teach, and then it's funny, I brought so many of them out to get tours of Fox 35, and one of them I think became our intern actually out there. So it's just kind of funny how things
they've all come back around. So to think about it, that was here celebrating 50 years at the University of Central Florida, but you're 20 years if you think about it, I guess. At the WOFL building. You can't say Fox 35 News. You could say the WOFL building, 20 years.
Well, yeah, off and on. I mean,
off and on. I know what that means, yes.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with off and on there.
Yeah, indeed. 1993 intern, back in 99 to 2009, and then through some various circumstances back again, September of 2011, and still there now.
A couple of weeks ago, I had Joe Dorsey here, who's the, as I said, the president and CEO of Red 5 Productions, Joe Dorsey Productions. But he and one of his buddies, John DeMeo, also have a business called Production Apprentice.
Correct.
So it's a very informative web page for people that are interested in the industry, getting maybe some questions answered that you don't normally. But I see they've also taken a turn where they're getting into interview segments. They recently interviewed the editor of the movie Argo.
Yeah.
And then not too long ago, you had the opportunity to do an interview for Production Apprentice. And who was that you interviewed?
Don Roy King. The way that kind of came about, my correspondence with Don, I had went to see the movie Morning Glory.
Now available on Netflix. I've seen that and I put it in the queue because I do want to see that.
It's very good. Okay, so the movie's going and there, it's about a young producer and is kind of making her way through the world of network television.
Right.
And you've got Harrison Ford as a kind of cantankerous anchor, and it's really funny. But they were doing a lot of control room scenes. And in my opinion, oftentimes Hollywood doesn't always get it right.
I know. You always do get disappointed, even in some of my favorite movies like Network, for example, or what's the one with Holly Hunter?
Oh, Broadcast News.
Broadcast News.
Great movie.
They're both great movies, but there's a slight silliness to it where you're like, well, that's not the real way it really
happens. The control
happens.
room, it's like, wait a minute, there's 75 monitors and they're all in color bars.
Right.
I don't think that's ever happened that I can think of, unless we're testing,
But for the most part, we love those movies.
We love them, absolutely.
And Morning Glory is one of those.
Well, yeah, and so they get to these scenes within the control room, and my wife leans over to me and she says, look at the Hollywood version again, the director's standing, almost like he's
orchestrating.
And she
yes.
says, isn't Hollywood kind of silly? Because I know you sit, and I said, well, I do, but I said, a lot of these, I leaned over, a lot of these network guys I've read, they do stand. Depending on the show and the situation, I said,
right.
This guy seems like he's a real director.
Right.
I said, let's stay for the credits, and I'm going to see who plays him, and I'm going to look him up. Well, we did, and I was like, Don Roy King. I was like, IMDb in my phone. Oh, director of Saturday Night Live.
Right.
My goodness,
Since 2005?
So he was a real 2006.
Six?
So I went to LinkedIn and thought, you know what, I'll just ask him some questions. I mean, who better to ask on multi-camera live television directing, which is what I do, than someone like him. And so I was very pleased that he responded back and linked in with me. So
right.
We kind of began to correspond, and then I got a phone call. And, oh my God, 212, who do I know in New York? And so I listened to the message. Hey, Darren's Don Roy King up in New York. Give me a call. We'll talk. Talk for 30 minutes. The most gracious gentleman I've ever spoken to.
I remember you discussing this.
Yeah.
And I remember after you discussed it with him, I asked you, did you see the Emmys a couple of nights before?
Oh, yeah, and you showed me
and you had said no, and I said, yeah, he just won the Emmy for Saturday Night Live for directing,
yeah.
I believe.
And basically said something, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, the only reason I'm standing up here and the other guys that I've been nominated with are not is because I just, I have a wonderful crew, and basically giving the praise to the crew, which as directors we all know, without the crew, right. we don't have anything. And then I think dedicated something, or made a comment about his daughter. I thought, wow, again, what a gracious guy. So when I talked to John DeMaio about working with Production Apprentice and basically doing some writing here and there, I thought to myself, well, are we kind of open for anything? So, whatever you can get. I mean,
right.
Talk about directing. I mean, I suppose so I did a couple articles on that. And then I thought, well, maybe Don would be interested in being interviewed by me for Production Apprentice, and he was. And so August of last year, we had about an hour conversation, and I was thrilled. I mean, he told me so many interesting things about not only his life and his background,
sure.
but how the business kind of, I almost want to say was. I mean, it still is for him, clearly.
It still is for him because he's in a location at Saturday Night Live as a director where it hasn't succumbed to the evils of ELC. For those who don't know what ELC, automation, yes. It's still he still has a man for every camera, and he is in control of everything, whereas television directors these days seem to have fallen to the way of technology and robotics.
Well, that's a special thing. I mean, that's a variety show. It's live. It's meant to be. That's the way that should be done and will be done.
Right, and he's in a rare location because you don't see it anymore.
Well, you don't. It's kind of and that's a little bit what we talked about. We both agreed, and it is online still. You can go to productionapprentice.com and read the full thing.
If you go to the productionapprentice.com webpage, it does appear up in the front. You see Don Roy King's picture pop up along with the picture of the editor of Argo. Right. But if you click on that, you can see Darren's interview that he did. I want to say you did a sit-down interview with him because you were probably sitting down talking to him on the phone.
Indeed.
So it was a sit-down interview, you could say that, and you can go there and you can see the entire article, and it's a great read. You get to hear about his past with, was it the Merv Griffin show where he was directing?
Merv Griffin show.
And he did actually a little bit of writing for him as well. So he's got to feel, he seems to be a perfect fit for Saturday Night Live. Yes. And I guess when you think of the definition of when somebody says such and such is the fifth Beatle, that's in response to the person who is behind the scenes that couldn't have become what it is without that person. And I'm guessing that's definitely what somebody like him is. Lorne Michaels, I don't think of him as the fifth Beatle because he is out there. He's famous. He's very well known.
Absolutely.
It's the unknown person. It's the Don Roy Kings out there who I would consider like the fifth Beatle. It wouldn't go on. It wouldn't be as successful as it is without him.
And I think this goes down the line. I mean, certainly, you've got. I mean, a show like SNL. From what I learned from talking with Don. I mean, certainly you've got the creators.
Sure.
And then you've got, of course, the writers. And you've got the actors. That's what we watch for. We watch for the actors, and we respond to the acting. and the actors are presenting and acting what was written. Okay. So yeah, there's that background position of the conductor, of the director leading on. But see, that goes all the way down to, I would say, continuing on that analogy that you spoke of with the crew. Because once again, I mean, we take our marching orders, as it were, from the producers, or in his case, perhaps producers, the writers.
Right.
And we give our feedback, we give our input. But again, come showtime, if I don't have a crew, it doesn't go on the air, of course. But so. Yeah, I think that there's fifth Beatles throughout the entire production, all the way down. I mean, I used to say that, when we had, you mentioned automation, now, of course, so many things are all combined into one. But when we had positions spread out, I'm thinking of prompter operator. I remember a lot of our kids, I call them kids, coming through. A lot of them now have their own kids, actual kids.
Actually, that's true.
It is true, yeah. But I think about a few of them saying to me, boy, you're sticking me on prompter tonight, prompter, which is just rolling the words at the anchor. I said, let me tell you something.
You have no idea. Yeah.
I'm not just telling you this to make you feel good. I said, without the prompter, I mean, yes, they have scripts, but the honest answer to that is it becomes very difficult for the show to be done. And it's not just the anchors who are reading that prompter. I said, as a director, I'm back there, and I'm looking at that prompter and that screen in the control room as a way for me, with my scripts, as I'm looking at monitors, I'm seeing the words through this one, and it's just it's helping pace everything.
Pace the show, right.
Audio's doing the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I said, so it's like the metronome in music. So I said, your position as a prompter operator is very important.
Once you work there long enough, you start to realize that your role is maybe more important than you realized when you started.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, the prompter it's the lungs of, I mean, you cannot breathe without it.
The drummer.
Sure.
It's the
yes,
drummer.
the drummer, right. It keeps the beat.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it keeps the beat. Do you see any connection between, because I know you have a football background, and Don Roy King had a boxing background, I believe. Do you feel like there's a connection between the pacing and the movement of an athlete and what you see a director doing up there on the stage? You had asked sort of a question like that I'm kind of stealing from, where you said, do you feel like, was it the rhythm, perhaps it is, or you feel a rhythm, you feel a pacing where there's a connection between the sport and what he does for a living?
Well, I did ask him that, and he, from what I recall, he indicated that there was some of that. What he did recognize, and what I too would recognize, is that there is definitely a rhythm to directing. Now, whether you've experienced that rhythm prior to directing in sports, I mentioned, the drummer. I had a friend of mine who is a director here in town say to me that he thought, and I think he's right, that a lot of directors, if they were in a band, tend to be the drummers because of the rhythm of what a drummer does. The same thing as what we do, and I that's why I asked him that question, because I find directing to be very rhythmic in the way it goes. I have had opportunities in the last few years to direct some things off of automation and off of the script per se. And when I do that, I find myself standing. There was a musical performance I directed a few years ago, and I found myself standing. And I wasn't standing for any other reason than because it's hard to describe, but I was just tuned in to what was in front of me in terms of the monitors.
Right.
And the arms were going, because there was a jib and there was music, and my arms were going, and I remember one of the guys was in the booth, and he said, do you even remember what was going on? I said, I have an idea, but I was so tunnel vision. Right. And he said, well, I'll tell you, because I was there. He said, you had the one shot where you had the jib on the floor and the flourish of the song, and up came the jib. He goes, you crouched down and went, and jib.
And it's hard to be tuned in and do that sitting down. So it is for me. You may have stood up and not even realized it.
Probably.
And I had one experience like that just once, right after graduating from, and I got a job at a production company where we did at the Bob Carr Theater, children's dance studio. It was called Showtime Dance Studio, and we'd have 3 or 4 cameras set up at the company I worked at, and I usually would shoot camera, but there was one day where they needed me to direct. So you put the headset on, and with the kids, and it's cute, and they're dancing and stuff. Usually there's no problem, but then at the end of the night they have like a big finale, and everybody's dancing at once, and this comes over here, and you start to feel it, and then I was in that way where I did not realize it, that I had started to stand up.
Yeah.
As you start to say, this camera here, that zoom in and pick up that, and that's like the one and only time I've ever directed. I've been editing all these years, but it was a thrill. It really
It is a
was.
thrill.
And it was all live to tape, very similar to what you do, which is just live. There's no live to tape,
Yeah.
but it was an exciting thing, but very stressful at the same time, because there's no go back and let's do that again. You don't get that opportunity, just like you didn't get that opportunity doing weddings, something else you had done for
Correct.
many years as well.
Correct.
But yeah, I definitely do agree. There's that feeling you get. I only had it once, 20 something years ago, and
Right.
it's something that you get to experience. But I do feel that your rhythm, your pacing, your reason to stand up definitely gets stymied with this new technology that we have that forces you to just, this is going here and that's going there, and this camera's going to move on its own.
Well, and there's something I think there's a bigger picture about that. I think that, and I think I mentioned this to Don. It might have been off the record, which if I mentioned it would be on the record.
Yes.
But basically what I was saying is that I think that I gravitate towards that type of directing, and so
Of course.
while I was at a newscast, that the news department at that time, and even still today in many respects, wanted to open the doors a bit and just kind of let us experiment and play. Well, for me, okay, well then we've got this huge set, and you've got 7 presentation areas, and then you've got, of course, your main desk being one of the 7. But you told me you want them to move around. And
Right.
You're giving me three kids on cameras who are great at their job. Well, let's move these cameras, and so I was kind of making my own show, if you will.
Yeah.
But when you think about news, and you think about it, this is my opinion now, but where news might be heading. I mean, if news is heading to a phone, okay, or an iPad,
True.
then while there might be neat production you can still do, the bottom line is, I mean, for example, with the Pope recently, I was wanting to know what was happening, and I didn't need super cameras and jibs. I just wanted the textual information
Right.
as soon as I could. When you think about it that way, does there necessarily need to be all of this? And I think that that's part and parcel of where the business model is going. And so what I guess I've had a couple of younger people say to me recently, well, if I want to do SNL type stuff, now I know you interviewed Don Roy King, and I said, well, I don't know that I would say get as much local news experience as you can, because
Right.
local news is going automation. It is going like this, and I have to say, why not? Having done both, why does it necessarily need to be all this? Now, where I work, they also do want that, and I
Right,
always think,
right.
man, if you guys just were here about 4 years
Yeah,
ago,
I was going to
that's
say
what
10
we were
years,
doing.
but it wasn't. It was just 4 years ago.
We were doing that.
And you were doing the bumps and the camera work and the movement that is just not there in local television anymore.
Well, and I will say this about our station and about some people, which I won't name, but there are some people who can make those cameras, those robotic cameras,
Sure.
sing.
Sure.
And I will say that our product still, even though it is automated, still looks, for an automated program, it still looks pretty good. And that's not me, actually. I'm talking about other people that make this work. But yeah, I think that your sports variety, which is what SNL is. I mean, that's cameras and jibs and steady cams, and as it
Right.
should be. In fact, in town, there is that model in town in Orlando. It's called the Golf Channel.
Yes.
Where I had the opportunity a few years ago to do some freelance stage managing and got to see it in action and be participate in it. And I mean, it's from what I remember, I mean, it was a director, it was a technical director, it was an associate director who's timing everything. You had 3 cameras, you had 3 camera operators, you had a jib operator, and you had a Steadicam operator.
Right.
I mean, that's
the way you were.
Larger production.
That's right. A
That's
much
what it
larger
is.
production, and productions are kind of downsizing in news because they want to. Well, everybody has a budget, of course. They have to deal with, but they're always thinking of ways to simplify things. And I mean, for somebody who directs for a living, I'm sure that's kind of unfortunate that you see that and you have to live.
Well,
in
I
that.
feel, yes, that's an issue, and I feel more for the kids coming up who want to do this. I'm thinking of one in particular who asks me often what I can do to help train her to where she kind of wants to go, and
Right.
and it's hard for me because I can
Right.
I'll direct automation tonight. But if somebody said, I've got a freelance gig for you and it's you're going to have a full crew, I can also do that.
Absolutely.
That's what I enjoy more.
Right.
That's just the way I am. I feel it's a tougher road for her because
She didn't get the experience that you got 4 years ago, 10 years ago.
Well, we all can teach her automation, and she can execute automation, and in fact, she's doing a lot of that now, and she's doing it rather well. But I don't know how to quite quantify it, but I just think she's missing something by having a richer and fuller experience with a full crew. I think part of the reason why I was able to learn automation as quickly as I was told I was, and do it okay, is because I understand from a big global perspective, a 30,000-foot view of what this is that I'm doing, because I've done a lot of the other things. One of the greatest bits of directing advice I ever got, and I will mention this name, is Don Holt, who was my former production manager, and still I call him the boss. He's still,
very well known here in Central Florida.
Oh, absolutely.
If you meet somebody who doesn't know Don, just go meet the next person next to him. He probably knows Don.
Well,
it's so true. Everybody knows Don Holt.
This is true. I remember I was working at America's Health Network at the time out at Universal, and I hadn't talked to Don in a few years. So I called him. I said, "You want to do lunch? Catch up?" Because he was there when I was an intern at Fox 35, and then so it was mid-90s, and he says, "Yeah, let's go do lunch." And I said, "I cannot wait to show you America's Health Network. It's just, it's like what we were doing at Skyline Teleproductions. It's just this huge soundstage, whatever." And I think I'm going to come out and introduce him to people. Honestly, the minute I walked in the door, people that I worked with now at the Health Network were going past me, going, "Hey, hey, Don," and the hugs. And it took me 2 seconds to realize the whole this whole network knows Don.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, anyway, when I was an intern, I said at Fox 35 in '93, I said, "Don, I want to become a director someday." I said, "Do you have any advice?" And Don said, "Well, do you take 35 millimeter still photography?" I thought,
okay,
what does that have to do with directing? I was very young. And he probably registered that on my face, and he said, "Because the reason I'm asking you, Daryn, is because if you can learn to take a decent frame, you can compose a shot, you're on your way." And it took me a few years to really let that sink in. But now, I mean, almost 20 years later as a television professional, I can tell you he's 100% right. I mean, it's all about the basics, and that's going back to this person who is wanting to learn directing. It's tough. I mean, when I taught directing in '08, automation was around. We didn't have it at our station, and so I was able to teach it. The multi-camera live directing. I did some other teaching as well in that class. But if I were to be asked again, I don't know what I would say, because I can teach you to code, and I can teach you to hit a take button, and there's definitely something to be said for that. But is it directing?
The classes that you were teaching in '08, were they also the same classes you were taking in '90?
No. They were and that's not a discredit to UCF. I remember always, every semester, I wanted to take a actual directing class.
Right.
I don't remember why, but it was always this. One semester they'd have it, but I was already taking this. So then the next semester I was going to, let me open up and take this.
Right.
Oh no, it's not being offered to this next year, and I kept missing whatever this class was.
And I don't know if at the time that was just because there weren't enough people taking those classes.
Could be.
I mean, I remember that sometimes where I'd need to take a class and it wasn't available, but you'd have to take the semester after that, perhaps.
Correct.
Coming up with the UCF, meaning you can't finish, because some people have to carry over another semester waiting for a class.
That was part of it, yeah.
But I'm sure nowadays that's not a problem. Everything's probably offered every semester.
Well, it seemed like that, and when I was there, they were only the Nicholson School of Communications was on the horizon. It had been approved, and it was they were going to roll it out in a few years after I was going to graduate. So, excuse me. So I did all of my classes in underneath the library. What I'm saying is, I could see they weren't going to spend more money to really update everything when they knew that was coming down the road in a couple of years. So, I had a very good education. I had a great internship at Fox 35 with Skyline Teleproductions, Don, and all the gang there. But when I came back to teach in '08, I remember, first of all, I'm in the Nicholson School of Communication. I couldn't believe how awesome that place is. How just I could go on for hours about the place.
You had the comparison of the school you went to.
Correct. And so it's kind of like when you have children, you're like, you'll see something happen with your kids and you'll go, my God, I remember when that was me. And I remember the incident that happened and the hole I fell in, so I'm going to make sure my son or daughter doesn't do that.
Right.
It was kind of the situation where I learned directing. I mean, I learned it through the internship. I learned it. There were classes. I mean, I mentioned Tim Bartlett. He taught, I think I don't remember what the class was, like a general production class, but part of it certainly was directing because he was a director at that time. And so I learned a lot of directing through him through that. But this was a directing class. So I said, okay, this is going to be my one chance to really give these students who have signed up to learn to direct.
How many students?
I had 12 students.
Okay. All right.
And it was so funny because I don't know why this image keeps coming back, but I had to open the door. I got there and got everything set up in the classroom, and they were waiting outside, which is the procedure and protocol for this particular room. And so at a certain time, I would go out and I opened the door, and at first I was just I didn't know how to be,
Right.
So I opened the door, and I was just kind of like, well, come on in, guys, I kind of winging it, to be honest, in terms of how I was going to be with the kids. By the second or third class, I opened the door. I was like, "Hello, my friends. Come on in." They just were like these little kids of mine.
You knew how to be a director, but they don't tell you this is how you be a teacher. This is how you interact with them. They're just kind of thrown into that.
Well, I loved it though. I tell you, I loved every single class with these guys. I remember thinking, and I don't know if all teachers feel this way, but I remember within maybe 2 classes, I was like, I could tell you, I knew which one was going to be a director. And what's great is, I'm so proud of her. I knew she did not get an A. I know it sounds cliche, but she earned an A. And she was, I think, one of 2. But I remember thinking she's probably going to go off to, I think she's directing in West Palm Beach at the NBC affiliate in West Palm Beach.
NBC is Channel 5. I grew up down there, so she works
I think so.
Very, very popular station. Then.
Well,
fantastic.
And she sent me an email not that long ago. I think it was a couple years, maybe a year or so ago, and she just said, thank you so much. She said, I'm off and running. That was the payment. I don't care what they paid me.
The circle of life.
Well, that's what it was about. That's why I was doing it.
Right.
And she is directing.
That's a good story. That's a good story.
Yeah.
Well, then why not continue doing that, the teaching thing? Is that just something you wanted to try?
Well, I did kind of look into that. I did find out that you had to go back, I think, and get your master's if you were going to teach full time.
Oh, okay.
So it would be going back, paying for the classes, making the time, getting a master's.
But it was good. They gave you the opportunity to do at least teach one class.
Well, and I say it as in the official capacity, but I mean, look what I'm doing too, like with this person now who wants to learn. I mean, she's getting a class. I mean, what I'm teaching her, I mean, yes, I had more time to focus just on the students, not also on my job. I feel sometimes I show her a little bit and then I've got to go block the show and show her some more.
Sure, you really got to do your work, yeah.
But in essence, she is getting the same type of quote-unquote education from me that I would be giving to her, other than I'm not asking her to take a quiz or a test or, final exam or anything like that. And when I would teach and bring the kids out to Fox now we've been in the classroom, this is where I'm talking about. She gets the benefit of, she sees that every day she's in. So she is immersed in it, and that's a good thing. But sometimes these guys can just get immersed in it, be at awe of what's happening around them, and just things all swirl around them.
Right.
What I try to focus on with people who come to me and say they want to learn from me, whether it's directing or whatever, is to say, okay, well, you're here, and when it's directing time, as in the show, I can show you the things I'm doing. I can show you the code in our instance. But ask me other questions. Let me talk to you about the bigger thing of what's going on throughout the day. Just in like again, I mentioned it before, taking the plane and getting up 30,000-foot view, understanding the business, but not in a open your books to page, we're going to talk about the business now, but just as we're there, hey, you see that happening over there? This is why that's happening, because the business ties in this way, and the GM might think this, and the Vice President of News might think that. I'm just trying to, that's like a side thing.
There's a reason probably why the director sits in the newsroom. It's not just like, hey, we could set up your office in the control room and you could be all there. But there's a reason why you're in the newsroom. You need to be a part. You need to be listening to what's going on. You need to be a part of it before the show starts, way before the show starts. And what is a typical day for a television director? If you're working on, let's say, a 5 o'clock show, you come in at 2:30.
I'm in at 2:30.
Your day begins. I mean, immediately. There's work to be done immediately.
I come in, I take a nap right off.
Yes,
the bat.
right.
I catch up on sleep.
It's important to have a well-rested director.
You gotta be well-rested.
You never know when we're just going to go wall to wall with something and not go off the air.
And I got to be awake for it. So I start by sleeping. No, it's not true. You're right. I do get in right away. Probably get a cup of coffee or tea or whatever I'm doing. But yeah, I like to get right in and get kind of at it. And it used to be because I had to figure out what this coding thing was all about. But that's not the case now. Now it's just I like to get things laid out. News changes all the time, and I know that. I'm well aware of that. But what I like to do is have the skeleton. Think of it as a skeleton. I like to get that skeleton locked right away. Then, if it's locked and I'm sensing nothing's breaking and I'm looking at my producer for the 5 and she's fine, then I'm like, maybe say hi to somebody, whatever. But you do it long enough, But if I've got that skeleton, we can get on the air with that.
Right.
Then it's starting to what goes in the monitors and what. So I start kind of with the skeleton, and then I add to that as we kind of go along. And I just pace myself. I'm constantly checking the clock and seeing where I should be. For example, I work. I didn't do this for the 10 years I was there at Fox the first time, but I'm doing it now.
For the second 10 years.
I work from the bottom of the show up. And I had somebody ask me that once, well, why don't you just start with the top of the show and block and code and all the things you do all the way down? Because the top, A block, is what's going to change with breaking news the most.
That's so interesting. We do that as editing as well.
You do?
Start at the bottom because all this stuff is set.
That's pretty much set.
We're all good. You go to the top and you start editing that first, guess what? You're going to get that phone call. Oh, hell, this is changing.
So you've got it too. So I go from the bottom up, and to be specific about something, if the show goes on at 5, I won't even go in the A block till 4 or even a little after 4. Just because why? It's fine, and it won't take me 10 minutes, if that, to code the A block anyways. Now we're at 4:10. So, but so I wait. That's one of the things that I do is I wait till 4. We print rundowns out about a half hour before the show. The rundown is mosely. The paper rundown is for my floor director to be able to know where we're going and to be my eyes and ears out there on the floor. But what I have blocked, I printed for him. But I then, at that point, when I get in the show, I'm going off a computer screen. So gone are the days of the big, thick scripts, which I did plenty of those. Boy, you'd start, 40 minutes of just going, or 30 minutes.
Writing and flips,
in the sweat.
All your, those
those are. I just go right off of the computer screen, which is the rundown. And for me, we always used to laugh at directors who were prompter directors. Use your scripts. Don't look at the prompter, because the prompter. Think of a TV monitor with words. If you were to look, the whole show would be like this strip of words.
Right.
And you don't know what's coming up. Take VO. You don't know when that's coming up until it shows up.
Until it shows up.
With a script, you do know that.
That's way too late.
Well, of course, I've got a window that shows me the text in the screen. But again, without scripts, which you don't really need them anymore, I have learned to become kind of a hybrid prompter director. I know I'm on cam to VO to SOT. So I know when to go on cams. I'm looking at it on the rundown. And I'm also watching, and I can see the longer, smaller version of the whole script here and the prompter. And I know I can see where VO. It's more to do.
Yeah.
But you do it. You take it for granted that you're doing it. But I know when it's going to say take VO here. I know it's about to come here. My VO's ready to go. Boom, we go. So. But anyway,
you've had to learn to adapt to some of the technologies that have been thrown at you. Yeah.
The biggest word that you just said is adapt. If I were probably now to tell anybody, if I were to teach, I would say, good morning or whatever, welcome to the first day of class. I'd go to the chalkboard. Now that old-fashioned there.
Right.
But I would put adaptability.
Right.
That's what's going to, and it's always kind of been that way, but it's more now than ever. You have to be adaptable as a director, not just in your day-to-day job, but in where this business is going, in particular what your role in this business is.
And not just your day-to-day job and your role in the business, but inside of a 1-hour show, you need to adapt extremely fast.
It's,
something you probably can't teach, you just need to experience over time.
That's what you need to experience over time. You have to have that. You have to have those shows where the plane is really on its way down, and I think a visual comes to mind. Great visual from what was the movie Flight? Is that Denzel Washington?
Denzel Washington movie. Yes.
I mean,
when that plane was
that
coming
going
down, and it was shaking. Right.
And he had to adapt, and
Yeah, and he was directing quickly.
Correct.
Not sober. Don't mean to give away too much about the movie.
This is true.
He was directing it not sober, but he's making decisions. And funny enough, he's got a headset on, much like a director,
Right.
making these decisions. We're going to pull these flaps here. We're going to flip this over here. All right, everybody, hang on here. What's your son's name? All right, well, you're going to pull this down now. Talk
Correct.
to your son. I mean, there's directing going on there.
Well, and of course, in what I do, no one's going to die no matter what happens. You know,
Right.
they might get angry with you, be unfortunate, ratings
fired.
might take
Right.
a dip, or fire. That could happen, I suppose, too. But at the end of the day, no one is going to die.
Right. You're never going to have to flip this building over.
No. Although I feel
to
like
make it land properly,
to make
though,
it
it
land
must
properly.
feel like that. Yeah.
It does feel like that. But you do always have to have those scenarios in mind. And I think that Captain was it Sullenberger comes to mind too. There was a lot of training apparently for what he ended up doing.
Water landing. Yeah.
And so many. I mean, how many flights did he do where that never had to happen? But he had been in situations, whether it was real, I don't think it was. I think it was all great training. I'm sure he had close calls.
Mm-hmm.
I've had so many shows. Tank. I've honestly
Right.
over the years. I mean, I've had great shows. I've had the shows where you end up standing, the chair goes flying behind you because now you're into it. The sweat is coming on, and you just get done. And you're like, that was so exhilarating. I've had shows where it's a walk in the park, and you're kind of like, well,
Yeah.
good show, everybody. And you
Yeah,
kind of go
that's
home
it.
and you go, well, that was good. Thank goodness it was clean, but. So I've had the whole gamut of them at this point.
Sure.
So you just know, you learn to compartmentalize that, and then you just know when it happens. It's kind of like a nah. If something's happening, breaking, which director am I going to be today?
Right.
I mean,
Which hat
you're
you
always the
gonna put on?
calm. Hopefully, you're always the calm director.
Right.
But which when I have to adapt. What type of armor am I putting on? Is there going to be a sea of managers behind me screaming because this is a humongous deal? If that's the case, I better put a bubble around me. And what's funny about a director, at least in my experience, and a lot of people, listening or watching who know me and know me back then will definitely laugh at this. But when I was younger in directing, it is a hot seat. There's no doubt about it, and there's a lot of pressure. And I won't say I'm a perfectionist, but I will say that I definitely had a vision for every show that I did, and so I wanted certainly to go right. I can't think of a director who kind of wants it to go wrong. I mean,
Right.
we all want it to go right. But I got caught up in that, some will call it anger. I suppose how could it not come across as that? But really what it was tension of what was happening and that it was happening wrong, and it was more on me. It really wasn't. It sounded always like I was mad at that crew
Right.
person, but I was more mad at can I get us? Can I flip this plane?
You're just being you're being hard on yourself at a time when
Absolutely.
so many things are going. If people could experience what we experience on headsets during a show,
Oh, yeah.
the show behind the show, it's
That's a show.
it's
That's a show
fascinating.
unto itself.
It is.
It really
it is a very
is.
crass and crude show.
It can be.
but it can be also
Can be.
hilarious and be
Yeah.
sometimes the product can be
Well,
better than what actually people see at home.
And so to use that analogy, well, not analogy, to use the reality of 1,000 managers in there screaming because it's a big show, you'll see directors, at least in my experience, and even with myself, I know that I will, almost, not like a turtle in this show, but I will put up that bubble and I'll get very calm, almost zen-like
Right.
calm. And I've worked with a few producers who, they just get going, and
Right.
they want to know why you're so calm. Like, don't
Right.
you care?
Right.
And it's like, it's because I care so much
Right.
that I'm being very reserved. Because
you're doing that to protect yourself because protecting yourself protects the show.
if we're going
Imagine.
down the road, okay, the analogy, and I'm a director, so I'm driving the car, and you're the producer, and you're sitting in the front seat, and you've got the maps, you've got the directions, you're telling us where we should go on our journey, but I'm driving the car.
Right.
It starts to rain. We've got music going, we're having a good time, we're talking, whatever. It starts to rain. There's heavy traffic. There's, more than rain, there's wind whipping, and gosh, is that a tornado? Is that a funnel cloud?
Right.
I guarantee you I will turn down that music and I'll say shh, or shh, because I'm trying to concentrate. Now, everybody who's ever been in that close to that situation driving would know what I'm talking about. Well, that's what I do. If I start yelling, turn the music up even more. You're yelling, is that a funnel
Right.
cloud? I don't know, is it? This car's going to go right off the road, or the show's going to go right off the tracks.
The producer does have the map sitting next to you, but you're the one that can see down the road and see that the bridge is out.
Well, and that's a great point, because it's not just driving down that road and looking at that road. It's looking ahead. Like you said, if there's wind whipping, are there trees on this road? There's not. Okay, so back of my mind means a tree's probably not going to fall on our road. But if there are trees, okay, I see that they're not bending and breaking, but they could. And so do I grab a little tighter? And then if I do, could I get in this lane if I had to? Are there cars coming behind me? You do have to start, your mind has to start opening up and thinking,
Right.
all while it's probably maybe a sunny day at the moment,
Right,
you know,
right.
with a storm cloud looming. You know, I mean, I'll sit there in a show and I'll see, we have a monitor for our chopper that flies around, and oftentimes I'll see it flying over some smoke. Well, that's the smoke cloud. So it's a sunny day. We're all on headsets, like you said. We're
Right,
having a good
right.
time. We're laughing. Show's going along. It's clean. Knock on wood. This is great. But I see something happening in chopper, and I'm thinking, well, that could be a big thing. And it might just be a quick hit. We take it. Breaking news. Chopper. Super. So maybe some music. This is what's happening. We'll have a full report later. Or this could be the big one, whatever
Right.
that is.
Like, it's not a forest fire. There's an actual
Is a
house on
huge,
fire.
or even worse. And so your show then immediately gets thrown out the window. You get phone calls start ringing in the booth.
Mm-hmm.
The producer may or may not get a little more amped up. The door may open. Now you've got managers coming in. You've got to be ready and adapt.
I've always been interested in, and between all of us that we associate with, we all have enough cameras. I'd be fascinated to just set up every camera we have and not tell anybody and just hit record at the hour of the newscast and then watch it back, edited together, just to see what really goes on. I don't think people have any idea.
So here's your thought. I see your cameras here. All right.
Mhm.
It's a very special overtime with Art Miles.
Yes, yes.
And it's done from the. You got the 3 cameras here. Set
Right.
them up in the booth, or whatever, and you show parts of.
Set them all up, yeah.
That would be interesting.
And we'd have to have a camera for each person, because each person has an important role, and you would see that through that documentary.
Sure.
That even that person who's sitting at the news desk during the show who gets that phone call, suddenly that
Yeah.
goes to, I got to tell you something to this, and then suddenly that becomes part of the show. It's all,
Yeah.
we
that's-
see it in films,
Yeah.
and we don't really see it in films, though, the way we
If you
live
had
it.
if you had a camera on an executive producer during the course of our 5, to use the 5
Right.
as an example, and you had a camera on the producer of the 5 o'clock,
Right.
and you had a camera on me, that would be interesting, because you would hear something in that you would catch probably something breaking in the newsroom,
Right.
and you'd, oh my gosh, I got to call the producer. You would then hear
This
the
was
producer
a,
going,
this was
what
a
do you want to
scene
do?
in
Yeah.
broadcast news,
Yeah.
where Albert Brooks was sitting at home, and he makes the call, and then it goes from there into somebody's earpiece, and then things like that do happen. But that would be something interesting to
Yeah,
do.
it
Set
would
up
be.
all the cameras. Well, you've described a couple of things about what you do that sound familiar to some of the answers you got from Don Roy King. And when it comes to, I sit down here, we discuss this, the scripts, we mark this stuff. He goes through many of those things when he's directing Saturday Night Live. It's not just he sits down at 11:30 and he just pushes buttons. He's involved with the whole process from the first day, I believe on
Absolutely.
Monday. And one of the questions you asked him was about the Keith Richards episode, Kristen Wiig's final episode, and that was, I'm a big fan of the show. I always have been. I guess our whole lives, the show's
Yeah.
been on almost.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And you start to realize that you could be the greatest comedic actor in the world, but it's all about timing, not just your timing, but the timing from the director. Because if you want to give that little look to the camera and it's only just your eyes, if that director's not there,
You miss
it's
it.
not there. It's just not there.
when she played the character with it's like the Lawrence Welk show, and she's got the
The
little
hands,
arm.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And when you think about, I'm thinking about what you're talking about. So it gets to that point where the other girls on the show are singing their parts.
They're building up to her coming in.
And they're building up to her, and she comes in. So you've got, and of course Don is asking his TD to take, and there you go. There's Kristen, and she's got her arm, and she's doing whatever she's doing. What I love and what makes you think of Don at those moments is, for example, the cutaway. And it's
Right.
Fred Armisen,
Right.
who she'll say something kind of funny, and I'm not talking about. It seems to me like it's not always da 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 cut. It might be she gets it out, and just before she finishes, it's almost, or whatever,
Goes
it cuts
to
to
him.
him, and it's the reaction of Fred, like,
Right.
that's disgusting, you know.
And he's got a millisecond to make that decision, like, oh, there goes Fred's look.
Right.
Or because what if Fred gave that look a second too soon, or
Well,
a second
he's-
too late? He's got to follow.
He's probably
the action.
got in rehearsal and whatnot, he probably has a good idea that that Fred is in character and is going to react to basically be grossed out or whatever the thing is. And so while he's taking Kristen, he knows that's probably coming. But it's just it's like you said, it's that moment. You know, it's been planned out, but it's just the way in which the shot selection is done that adds so much to the show. And if you listen to the laughter, it really seems sometimes like almost that's where a lot of the laughter is coming, is on those selections. So yeah, I mean, it's again, if he's not paying attention, of course my biggest thing is, how could you come down off a show like that? Because to talk about paying attention,
you got to
of
go
course
to that. You got to go to that after party and just come down a little bit.
Yeah.
If I ever had the opportunity to go and see the show in person, I would be such a thrill. But I think, and you would probably agree, the bigger thrill would be to sit there in the booth.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because we've seen the show enough times to this is to be exciting. Like, oh, we sit here and look, the band's over there and this over there. But I would want to sit in there. That's where the real show, for me and probably for you, that's where the real show would be.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're not. I don't want to say they've been secretive, but they're not. You've never seen a full documentary on the behind the scenes of the show in that way, where you see what the director does for the day. There's been shows,
and you know why that is. I've talked with a couple of my friends about that. You know, if you watch, as a director, if I watch behind the scenes of any DVD, you know, they're making these things for all of us, for the mass, mass consumption of everybody who likes these movies. They're not catering them to a director. So it's like, and I'm so into what these directors are saying. So they'll show behind the scenes. They'll show this. A lot of times they'll show a scene that was filmed. You'll see the clapboard, and then you'll hear cut. And the director will say, that was good, but I'd like to, and then that audio gets dropped.
Exactly,
say,
and I'm like,
Director Steven Spielberg.
No, bring the audio back up.
Bring that
There's
back
so
up.
much of that.
If I could just get the raw, and that's what I would like to own, as opposed to the thing and those are all well done. Same thing with SNL. I do think there was a documentary, and like as soon as they were in the booth, I maybe heard a snippet, but I'm thinking that their thought is, well, that's kind of
no one's going to be interested. No, you have no idea.
I would love
you have no idea how many
absolutely.
careers you would begin. From little kids saying, that's what I want to do.
Oh, well, that's true.
You hear all those stories from directors. I was in the movie theater and I saw Star Wars and the Death Star blew up and I was like, that's what I want to do for a living. They're cheating people out of, well, you know what they're doing? They don't want those kids to grow up and take their jobs from them.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
But yeah, they are cheating people out of an experience that I find fascinating.
Oh, it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I see that Don Roy King. It was Roy was the middle name? Can't go as Don King, so I imagine he had to throw that middle name in there.
That's someone else.
When he's not doing Saturday Night Live, or at least he was some years ago, he was directing like a Broadway type scenario where they would record the final show of a Broadway show, and they would be something that was pay-per-view or something that was, and I imagine he'd be perfect for that job because of what he does for a living, Saturday Night Live, but also in some ways slightly more exciting for a director to do something like a Broadway play, because you really as a director, you're probably really standing up now because there's a lot going on a Broadway play.
Well, as Don told me, and it's in the article, his first passion was actually theater and
acting, I believe. Yeah.
Correct. So it was no mistake, that he was in Morning Glory, and you mentioned that he would be great he is a great choice to direct these Broadway performances because of SNL, but really it was the other way around. He did obviously start out as multicam live director. We mentioned the Merv Griffin show and others, but he got to a point where it seemed to me in the article, in interviewing him, that in doing the theater, that was like, I don't want to say his true love necessarily, but it was definitely almost a deeper extension of what he did then. So it was almost, in my mind, and of course I didn't interview Lorne Michaels, but I would be interesting to find out how much Lorne looked at what Don did and is still doing, but back then what Don did, directing these theater performances, that would make him a good fit to be a director of SNL.
And from what I remember from the article, and I'm the same way, he didn't have a resume. He didn't have a video resume, really,
At that time, he did. Well, no,
because he'd never had any need to make one before. And then it's like, how do you go back and make a video resume that helps show people what you do? It's very difficult. Even as a television director, you want to say, all right, I directed this show. But I think the better demo reel would be this behind the scenes thing that we're talking about,
Yeah.
to really see how somebody deals under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that he didn't have really, he had to put together something to show to Lorne Michaels, I believe.
That's what happened, yeah. He had somebody he had worked with, I think it was when he worked at CBS, directing the morning show there, who had then moved on from CBS to SNL, I think, as a...
Is this TD now?
I think it was an associate director, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps a technical director, who basically said, and again, this story is in the article as well, basically said, Beth McCarthy Miller is leaving, and they're looking for someone, and I'm kind of saying, hey, why not Don?
Right.
And I think it caught Don somewhat by surprise.
And he felt like at the time he wouldn't be a good fit, from what I felt from the article.
I don't know that he necessarily thought he wouldn't be a good fit, but I think he just kind of saw himself as, he was doing what he was doing. He had been doing it for a while, directing the CBS morning show. And, that's news, not variety. It's not sketch work, and it's not bands. It's a newscast. And so while he, I'm sure, thought, I could do this, I don't think that it entered his mind. Same thing as teaching. I mean, when somebody, when I got the call and they said, have you ever considered it? Half of me, a small part of me right away was kind of excited and thought, well, I mean, I talk to people. I have no problem talking to people or kids. I could teach. But the real answer was, well, no, I actually hadn't considered it at all. And so maybe that was kind of the same thing going on with him. So in somewhat of an almost protocol fashion, they needed something to see. And so he said, I don't have a tape. I don't have,
Right.
And his friend said, well, come on out and, we'll put something together.
And at the time, they were kind of in a bind at the time because she was leaving, and it was the summer, and they really needed to get a director.
They did, and I don't know how much of a bind they were in or what other candidates might have been out there, but I got the sense that they were really looking for someone at this point, and I think Don put it that they were desperate, but seeing Don's work, I can't think that
being gracious. Yeah,
I think he's being gracious, but
he seems like a nice guy.
Oh well, yeah, he seemed like just a total gentleman in this industry.
I wonder if is he into like doing the guest speaking or anything like that, or Q&A?
I don't know.
At colleges in the area or something.
Well, I know during season. I mean,
there's probably
my goodness.
No time.
Yeah, he's got to be swamped. I know that I do think that they have summers off. I don't know.
As a viewer, I always get frustrated because I love the show, Saturday Night Live.
Me too.
I get frustrated because they do 3 episodes and then they always take a week off, and I'm always like, and it's like next week, and then you see who it is, like, that's a repeat. But I can appreciate now how they just need to.
When he told me the process of what it took to put a show together, I told him as such. I said my heart is racing as I'm listening to this,
right?
Because it just was like a machine. I think he mentioned.
And the show is on so late on Saturday. They have a little party, which means they probably, when the show is on, really only have one day off a week, and that's just Sunday to just take it easy because they're back right up again on Monday.
Correct. It seemed like Sunday was that day, and that, at least for him, Monday was kind of a day to... It sounded like mostly the writers were dealing with Monday and kind of getting the guest host acclimated to everything that day, maybe into Tuesday. Mm-hmm. But I remember by Tuesday afternoon, I believe it was, or Tuesday evening, and certainly into Wednesday, he's up and running. He's putting it on its legs on the stage, and he's getting it going. And then come Thursday and Friday, and it's just...
It's got to be stressful.
Oh, yeah.
You'd think they'd go through more directors just because they leave out of stress, but they've really, in 35, has it hit 40 years yet? 76? I don't know the math, 86, 96?
Yeah.
They haven't had a whole lot of directors in that time.
No. They've had 1, 2...
4 or 5?
I think they've had...
Is he the fifth one? A fourth one?
I think he might be the fourth. There was Dave Wilson, and
That's pretty amazing.
I think there was someone for an interim time, and then there was Beth McCarthy Miller, and then there was him. So I believe he's the fourth one. So. And
that's amazing. Oh, well... There's a lot of downtime, of course, and this gives him the opportunity to do these other things, the plays and stuff. But could you tell through the interview at all that this is something that he's going to be doing for quite some time? Did he say?
He seems to absolutely love it. So I think so.
We've reached a point now where the show's been on since '76. I love the show, and there's going to come a point where you're going to have to consider that he's going to want to retire, Lorne Michaels. And there's going to have to be a grand change there. Or is NBC going to say, well, is this the time that we stop the show? I think it's reached the point now where you can't stop. It's its own thing now where Lorne Michaels will one day have to step down. Personally, I'd love to see in 10 years from now, Lorne Michaels step down and Tina Fey take the job.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't that be something to have it come back around because she's done so well successfully on other television
That's interesting,
shows,
actually.
to see her take the job. So I'm putting that out there now that she'll never see this. But wouldn't it be nice if 10 years from now, the former head writer, the very successful Emmy Award-winning television creator, come back and take that show over?
That's interesting, yeah. Yeah.
But someone's going to have to one day, and they're going to need a constant in there, and hopefully it'll be Don. Maybe he'll be directing, for the next 10, 15 years. I mean, why not? It seems like a thrilling job. Was it something you'd love to do possibly one day?
Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah. I mean, I think some of the same things that are thrilling to Don are thrilling to a lot of us as directors. The chance to be creative.
Sure.
The chance to be included, really, frankly. I mean, I don't want to sound like a pity thing, but to be included and to actually...
Part of the team, absolutely.
Well, part of the team, sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And to be working... with the best, the best in the business. And what I mean by that is not from an ego standpoint, but from a standpoint of support. Again, I can't do my job without a crew. Now, I say that where I'm working, we don't have a lot of crew because of the way it is. But to do, let's put it this way, to do what he's doing, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't have it look and sound and be that show without that crew or a very good crew. And so... how blessed would it be for us directors to be able to have, a crew like that? I mean, I do have somewhat of a feel of that once when I worked at a place and was stage managing and was looking at my rundown and, okay, we're going to go to a package. I guess I better make sure that the next, because I'm looking at down the road, okay, it looks like there's going to be a change, a location change, and this is a, 2-minute package, so there's not a lot of time.
Right.
And before I could even open my mouth to say, hey guys, let's go ahead, and they were flanked out. Let's get this, let's get that, plug that in. They were doing it. And I thought, my God, this is one of the best crews I've worked with. They look down the road too.
You're quarterbacking and you're already up there, but the guys on either side of you are making changes already before you snap the ball.
Well, that's a great analogy. I mean, if a director's a quarterback, I mean, if the lineman's not blocking, and I was a lineman in high school, if the lineman's not blocking, they're getting sacked every time, and nothing happens.
See how we brought it full circle back to sports again?
We did.
I see my little red lights blinking. That means your tape's about to shut off. So if you're interested in the article, it's at productionapprentice.com. Joe Dorsey and John DeMeo run the site. It's very informative. It's great. You've begun writing for them. If anybody wanted to follow you on Twitter, tell us what your Twitter page would be.
I believe...
you believe?
I believe. I know. I got to get more into this. I think it's at Daryn Johnson.
At Daryn Johnson. All right.
Correct.
If you want to check out old episodes of Overtime with Art Miles, you can check us out on our Facebook page. Also, you can check out our Vimeo page, which is Overtime with Art Miles. Occasionally, you can check us out on Twitter at Overtime with Art. And we want to thank Daryn Johnson for coming out here today. And thank you all for watching, and we have to get back to work now. Bye-bye.